Aelius Pertinax, sexagenaria major, imperator salutatus est post interfectum commodum, licet nomen imperii tamquam rem invidiosam, et senectutem cassando recusaret. Imperatoriis possessionibus nomen sum inscribi prohibuit, dictitans non esse illas proprias imperantium, sed communes Romanorum et publicas esse. Laetus tamen praefectus praetorii, qui eum imperatorem fecerat, quod saepius reprenderetur abeo, convocatis militibus, qui inter ruina et epulos consilia inierunt. Pertinacem in pallatio confodit, sexto in perimense. Sic perit venerabilis enex, qui fuit imperatoria statura, facies venenusta, eloquentia mediocris et blandicies innata. Aelius Pertinax, over 60 years old, was hailed as emperor after Commodus was killed, although at first he refused this imperial title as being unenviable to have and on account of his old age. He forbid for his name as emperor to be inscribed on any imperial items, declaring that these things were not meant for use of the Roman court, but for the common people. But, however, the praetorian prefect, who had named him emperor, was insulted because he was often criticized by him, and so, calling together a force of soldiers amid the wine and feasting, he assassinated Pertinax in his palace. Thus perished a venerable old man who had the stature of an emperor, a kind face, mediocre eloquence, and certain innate blandishments. Julianus, patria mediolanensis, audita morte Pertinacis, sedatoque tumulto in urbe, qui a publico ob eius caedem exercitus fuit, ingecit se militibus edicentibus imperium venale, e mercatusque imperium magno militium comitatu armis munitus in aulam deducitur. Actum primum correpti sunt militium mores, foedaque et insetiabilis pecuniae cupiditas, et contemptus imperatoriae maiestatis innuluit, cum nullis crudeliter interfecti principis vindex extiteret, et nemo emptum nundinatumque imperium prohiberet. Ubiatem Julianus imperium est adeptus, deliciis continuo crapulaeque deditus, circa rem publicum indiligens, vitam mollissimam traduxit, spe sua militibus frustratis. Nam fidem promissiorum non implevit, nec publico aerario perpecit, in visus ergo militibus atque senatui, abrogatum est ei senatus autoritate imperium, severusque imperator appellatus. Tum missis a senatumque eum occiderent, interfoedas conplurationes ab omnibus destitutus obtruncatus est, cum imperaset mensibus duobus. Vixit autem annis 56 vir senex gulosus, aliaror, superbus et cetera. Julianus, born of his native Milan, having heard of the death of Pertinax, and calming the uprising which the people had raised in that city because of his murder, presented himself to the soldiers at Rome, who were proclaiming the empirehood up for auction. And so, having purchased his seat of empire, he was led into the palace, along with a large retinue of soldiers. And then, for the first time, the morals of the soldiers were corrupted, and a foul and insatiable lust for money grew among them, and contempt for the imperial majesty flourished, such as there hadn't been since the time of Vindex, as there was no one to avenge the murdered prince, or to prevent the government from being bought and sold. And just as soon as Julianus had gained power, he gave himself over to pleasures and debauchery. And having no regard for the republic himself, he led a most easy life, the hopes of his soldiers being squandered. For he didn't fulfill any of his faithful promises, nor did he spare the public treasury. Therefore, being hated by the soldiers and by the Senate, he was deposed of the empirehood, and the Senate revoked his force of command by arms, and Severus was named as the new emperor. Then, having been sent by the Senate to have him killed, he was beheaded and deprived of the lamentations of all. Having reigned for just 2 months, he lived for 56 years, already an aged man, gluttonous, gambling, arrogant, and other things.
Severus in lepti civitate Africae natus, studiorum causa Romam venit, tandemque post quaesturam et praefecturam imperatores appellatus, quod tempore et Pescennius Niger a Syriacis legionibus imperator est salutatus, congressi ergo apud sinum issicum, ubi quondam debellatus est Darius ab Alexandro Magno insignis, editaist strages interiitque Niger, ac brevi omnis familia eius est extincta, sed ille imperium magis metu quam benevolentia retinuit, ut esset imperator Verus nomini sui, Pertinax et Severus. Mortuus est tandem Ebraci in Britannia, senex, anno imperii 12 aetatis 89. Fuit vir bellicosus, liberalis literatus, ac insignis mathematicus, crudelis tamen adeo ut senatus judicaverit illum aut nasci non debuisit, aut non mori, quod et nimis crudelis et nimis utilis rei publicae videretur.
Septimius Severus was born in the city of Lepto in Africa. He came to Rome for his education, and at length, after having served as a quaestor and a prefect, he was named a Roman emperor, at which time Pescennius Niger as well was named emperor by legions in Syria. And so the two of them met at the Gulf of Isthmium, where once Darius had been defeated by Alexander the Great, and a most notable massacre was made. Niger perished, and after a short time his whole family line was removed. Thus Severus retained the empire more through fear than through benevolence, and he's said to have been the first emperor true to his name, pertinent or useful, and serious or severe. He died, however, at York, in the colony of Britannia, as an old man, after reigning for 18 years in the 89th year of his age. He was always a warlike, liberally educated man, and a distinguished mathematician. Yet he was so cruel that the Senate judged of him that he either should never have been born or never should have died, since he seemed at the same time both too cruel and too useful for the Republic.